Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher, and I'm here with Lucy and Amanda. We work at the Ann Arbor District Library, and this is a program all about a comparison between books and movies called No, But I Saw the Movie, which I actually did not come up with. It's a collection of short stories that were all made into different movies, but I really like the title. So, Lucy, do you want to start us off with 5 of your picks?
Sure. So I'm going to start with one that I actually just saw the movie of, and I recently reread the book, which it's The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. And I read the book originally right when it came out, and then I recently reread it for a library discussion, and I loved the book equally the second time, if not more. And then we watched the movie a couple nights ago, and I usually don't, when I finish a book, I usually don't watch the movie if I'm going to that soon after it, because I know that I'll make comparisons. And I did. I made a lot of comparisons. I would say that I liked the book better, but I think that the movie is also an important part of like continuing that conversation about systemic racism. And it did a really good job bringing all those points in there. There were a few parts in the movie where they kind of downplayed microaggressions, I don't know, to make it softer, that strengthened the story. So I was a little disappointed with some of the details, but I think if I'd had more space between the two of them, I would have liked the movie a lot too. I don't know if either of you saw the movie or read the book, but
yeah, I read the book same when it came out, maybe a few months after. Really strong, impactful book. I loved the book, loved it. And I saw the movie again, like right when it came out, which would have been like, 8 months later or whatever. I still enjoyed the film. I think they did a good job. For somebody who's not a reader, I can see they could watch it and still get some of the points that you're supposed to get from the book. But I love the book.
Yeah. And then the other book to movie, because the other ones I have are TV shows, but the one I wanted to talk about was It by Stephen King. So I read that book in high school, and I loved the book. I loved it. And I think what I loved the most about it, actually, like it has those scary parts, but I loved the story of those friends. Like that, to me, is the most memorable part. And I always think of that when I think of that book. And so I found the movie to be disappointing. Also, just because I don't think that...
Which movie version?
Yeah, there's more. So I've only seen the most recent one. And I just, it didn't live up to what I had carried the book around in my head as being for so long. I also think with It, like there's and I don't know if it's like a lot of that genre, but Stephen King especially like brings up so much in your imagination. So it's a difficult challenge, I think, to then put that in film because someone's picturing it for you. And so for me, I would have been fine just holding on to the story I got from the book and maybe not seeing the movie. I only ever saw the most recent movie version. I mean, I was scared at times for sure in the movie, but
yeah. Christopher, did you see the 1990 version with Tim Curry?
I did, and with John Ritter.
Yeah.
I love that it was
maybe
TV.
I have to watch that one then.
Oh, see, what I loved so much about it was all the nostalgia. It seemed to kind of predate Stranger Things.
So maybe I just watched the wrong version.
Well, I read it, same thing in high school, and I read the book right before the TV miniseries was supposed to come out, around the same time, like in 1990. So I was fresh off the book. And again, it was like a TV miniseries, so you had to wait for it to come out. And I think it came out like in 4 parts or something. Yeah. And so you had to wait each week for like the new part. But I liked it. It was super cheesy. And I still like that 1990 version better than the part 1 and part 2 that came out recently. Yeah. But I still enjoyed part 1 and part 2. The acting was good. Number 1 was really strong, but part 2 was pretty weak. But I really enjoyed part 1 of the new one.
And then the other ones I have are all books to TV shows, because it seems like that is what I am consuming more of these days. Also, there's some really strong stuff. I would start with The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which I read that book probably about 10 years after. I think it was written in like 1985, so I probably read it about 10 years after it came out. And I was blown away by it when I read it. It was this, I picked it up because I'd finished another Margaret Atwood book, and I was like, I have to read more of this author. And it was just this amazing piece of speculative fiction, and I love the way it was written. I think for the TV show to have come out when it did, it turned into something different, which was, how far away is this from where we are right now? Mm-hmm. And I thought the TV show, like the seasons, especially the first 2 seasons, probably the acting was incredible. And they did such a good job sticking with the story. But then what was interesting about that to me is that the TV show starts to go beyond the book. And then it turned around and had Margaret Atwood wrote a second part to The Handmaid's Tale after the TV show had come out. So it's sort of like,
oh, wow.
You know, the book influencing the TV show, and she had a big hand in the TV show, and then the TV show turning around and influencing her again. Because I don't know if either of you've seen it. Christopher, I think you told me you started watching the show, but
I did watch season 1.
Yeah.
And it blew me away. Elizabeth Moss is just so moving in her, some of her hidden rage, and I don't know. That had a huge impact on me, but I did not want to continue. I wanted a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah. And so I just wanted to stop after season 1 and just say that was magnificent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do think sometimes these things go on for too long. Like they don't know when to stop. You know, I would say if you want to watch the first episode of season 2, it's like, seriously, blew me away. But it also took place right in Fenway Park, so that might have been part of it.
Yeah, I didn't read it or watch it, so
yeah. Oh, I would recommend, like, if you're interested in watching the show, just for Elizabeth Moss alone, like her, it's so much of it is her face,
yes,
like conveying, as you said, Christopher, this rage and this. I don't know. I thought it was great. Mm-hmm. And that sort of leads me to another TV show, which is based on a Margaret Atwood book, which is Alias Grace. And it kind of happened backwards for me with this one. I had picked this book up, Alias Grace, and never could get into it. And then they did a TV series, like a 1-season TV series. I think it was on HBO, but I could be wrong. And it was really, really good. And once I had watched that, then I was like, oh, maybe I want to revisit the story in the book. And then I read the book and loved it. But, you know, sometimes it's like you get that you're influenced the other way. So that just, The Handmaid's Tale sort of reminded me of that. I don't know if either of you read that book, or it's based on a true story. It's good. I think the TV show was more approachable, maybe. Mm-hmm. So, but I would recommend either one if you.
How many seasons were for the show?
Just one, and it's like, and it's
one and done. Nice.
One and done. Yeah. So it's almost like a movie that's broken up, you know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the last on my list is also a TV show, and it is the book Normal People by Sally Rooney, which like had a huge it was her second book, but she was a very young writer. And when it came out, there was a lot of hype around it. And it's about these kids who meet in high school, and then they sort of have this relationship, was on and off and on and off through college and a little bit past that. And when I was reading it, I was so emotionally invested in this book and like what was happening with them. I mean, my husband would even say, like, he remembers me talking about it. And I just was sort of like pulled down into it. And when I heard it was made into a TV show, I thought there's no way that book existed inside those characters' heads. There's no way that they could do that. And so I hesitated watching it. And when I finally watched it, it had the exact same impact on me. And in fact, my husband, who never read the book, didn't know the story. And he never does this. He stayed up and watched the entire series in one night.
Oh, wow.
I know. I got up at 3 a.m. I'm like, what are you doing?
That's a good sign.
Yeah, I know. But they did such a good job, which is really hard to do, especially how can you make something captivating to a TV audience when so much of it is this internal thing.
Right.
A lot of it, I think, was influenced by the music that they chose. The background music, that sometimes influences the mood. So I don't know if either of you have read the book or watched the show, but I would recommend either. And in fact, I think I went back and reread part of the book when I finished the show. So
that's great.
Cool. You got some fun stuff there.
Yeah.
Amanda, do you want to tell us what you've got on your list?
Sure. So this was hard. I tend to have watched more of the shows and books or shows and movies than I've read the books. And I was going through the list to find things, and there's too many things for me to list that I've actually read the book and seen the show or the movie. But I thought I would start with one, and I didn't initially have this on my list, but then I decided to add it because of what it did for how I watched things after I had read something. And that was Coraline. So I'm not a huge, by Neil Gaiman, I'm not a huge fan of listening to audiobooks. And I listened to the audiobook for Coraline, and I really super enjoyed it. Neil Gaiman read it. It was just really, really good. And then years later, when the movie came out, I couldn't stand the movie. I super didn't like it. And it wasn't because it was an animation or the style. I just didn't like the changes. I just couldn't get into it. And I was mad. I was like, but the book, but the audio, I was frustrated. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because I really tried to sit and think and analyze and figure it out. And that was the movie that made me flip the switch and realize, Amanda, you can like a book equally and the movie equally, or if I look at them as separate entities, like separate beings, they don't have to be married. The same story doesn't have to be married. So it kind of made me look at adaptations a little bit differently. So and that helped me on my journey as I've read more things and watched more things that were based on things. What did you guys think of Coraline?
I saw the movie, which I thought was kind of terrifying, but I was watching it with my son when he was young. He was just very scared of the button eyes and the other parents and but I didn't read the book, but maybe I should.
Doesn't it have a Michigan connection?
Yeah, the dad has was it Michigan State sweater or something, and that all bothered me. There was and I love Michigan, bringing into everything I watch, but I just think I wasn't in the mood for it or something. I was just
right.
But I really like what you just said about those two things, and that I think that would have even helped me had I had that when I watched The Hate You Give so soon after I read it. I wouldn't have been watching with that critical eye of you didn't put this in there, but you missed that. That didn't happen then. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to try that.
Because I feel like when we read books that when we end up loving the book and then when we watch the movie, we get upset. Why did they change it? Why did they change the color of her shoes? And he doesn't wear that. And why did so-and-so die at the ending? They didn't do that. And we get upset. But if I try to look at it as just two pieces of art with the same story, and you take the liberties of whatever the writers and the directors did versus the author. Sometimes the book and the movie are both great. But Coraline was the one that maybe flipped the switch so I could appreciate the movies based on books that I loved even more than I would have. I still don't like Coraline, but that's me. Another book that I read is a kid's book, the kids fiction book Holes by Louis Sachar. And that is one where I enjoyed the book. I loved the book. Christopher, you alluded to it and the kids riding on bikes. I define the genre as little boy adventure stories, things like The Goonies, Stand By Me, Outsiders, all of those things. And Holes was that because you've got these kids on an adventure. And I love the book. And I was teaching some 5th grade and 4th grade kids at the time, and we were doing that as a reading group, and they loved it. It was so fun to talk about. And then I also loved the movie. I thought the movie was really entertaining. The kids were just sassy and adorable, and Sigourney Weaver, and I really enjoyed both the book and the movie for Holes.
I've seen the movie, and my brother quotes it all the time. I should read the book.
The book is cool. I don't want to do spoilers when I talk about my pieces or your pieces, I guess. I don't know. We didn't set that rule. In the book, there's a certain element where you're figuring out pieces and how things are related. And in the book, it's so cool when you start figuring things out.
Oh,
yeah, I enjoyed the book. So even I wonder how it is in audio. I don't know, but yeah. I mean, that book's old. I mean, it came out, when did it come out? I wrote a note here, 1998. I was trying to pick some YA, but I didn't. So Lucy mentioned it, and when we mentioned some of the books we were going to be talking about, and I said, well, Lucy's going to do it. That was written by Stephen King. I could not do Stephen King also. This could be a spin-off episode. But I have to mention Stephen King. I have 2 on my list. So Salem's Lot, the book by Stephen King. I really enjoyed the book. It was slow to start, but I really, really, really enjoyed the book. And I watched 2. It's been adapted. Many Stephen King's works have been, his properties are so hot right now, but even back in the 70s when things were being adapted, there were always many versions. So I watched 2. I watched the TV miniseries with Rob Lowe. I think that was 2004. Yeah. And then I also watched the really cheesy 1979 miniseries, and they were both pretty terrible. Like the one with the Rob Lowe was just, Donald Sutherland was in it. It was just really hard to watch. I forced myself to do it. I did it for Stephen King. You're welcome. But I preferred the 1970s cheesy one only because I had that cheesy 70s vibe, but it was pretty bad too. But the book was great. Did you guys have any familiarity with Salem's Lot?
I just keep hearing it mentioned as a lot of people's favorite Stephen King book.
Yeah.
It was one of his early ones. I think they're going to do it again. So it's not, I don't think it's been actually made into a movie. Most of it's been made for TV movies and series. But I think it's in the works again because people can't leave his stuff alone anymore.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, so there's this book called The Shining, also by Stephen King. Well, The Shining had a sequel called Dr. Sleep. Did you guys read Dr. Sleep?
No, I want to though.
So this one I mention because I actually liked the movie more than the book.
Really?
Sorry, Stephen. Yeah, so the movie just came out in 2019. The book came out, 2012? The book was 2013, and I read the book. I read the book the summer before the movie was coming out. Was it just last summer? And I read the book. I enjoyed the book. It was good. And it basically is a sequel to The Shining, which came out a long time ago. So it was kind of neat being back in that world. I was a little frustrated. I didn't really understand why there needed to be a book about it. But Stephen King had more to give and needed to get out of his system. And the movie, I really enjoyed the movie even more. And part so was because I really liked Mike Flanagan as a director, and he did a really great job with it. And so he had the big challenge of trying to marry this classic Stephen King book, The Shining. And then there's Stanley Kubrick's version of that as a movie, which you can't, once you've seen the movie version of The Shining, that's all you see.
Yeah.
So the director had the challenge, well, what do I do? And so he was able to marry, with Stephen King's approval, the visuals in the universe of Stanley Kubrick's book, but using the actual story that Stephen King wrote in the book. I mean, it's a little bit different here and there, of course, and that's all I'm going to say about Stephen King. Yes. All right. So
that movie's been on my list to watch, so now I'm definitely going.
It's a good movie. I bought the director's cut. This is what I do now. I buy a movie that's based on a Stephen King book. I told you it's a spinoff. But yeah, I recommend the movie. The movie's good.
Okay.
Yeah. If you just to kind of see, it's like Danny as a grown up with what happened to him. Yeah. Now we find out.
Before we leave Stephen King, though, I'm just curious if you've ever seen, I think it's called Stephen King's The Shining.
Yes. Yeah, it has Rebecca De Mornay in it.
Yeah.
And I forget what's the guy?
I don't remember. I think I saw another movie called Stephen King's whatever.
Yeah.
And this gets back to a point you were both making earlier. I don't think a movie has to be so faithful to a book. And I think it's okay if you have someone who's a great, a passionate filmmaker wants to take a story and run with it, you know, maybe that's okay.
Yeah. It's hard though, because with Stephen King, like his books are so meaty and there's so much detail, and a lot of the adaptations from the 80s and 90s are just awful. I mean, I've seen a lot of them, and some are fun just for like the creepy and kitschy factor. But yeah, like the 1997, it was no. I mean, and also it was different because Stephen King actually approved of that version versus Stanley Kubrick. He hated Kubrick's version. And so he and McGarris said, yeah, we're going to do my book. And then they put that one out, and it was awful because everyone had already seen and loved Kubrick's version of it.
Right.
Anyways, all right, I'm going to stop on Stephen King. Anyone else want to talk about Stephen King?
Oh, I think there's a lot to say.
Yeah. You know? The thing too with Stephen King, I'm just going to say one more thing, then I promise I'll shut up. I was putting together a book display at work maybe a year and a half ago. And I was like, I'm going to put a book display of books that were made into movies and TV shows. And I started pulling up all these lists online. Every other book title was Stephen King. Like he has so many of his works have been adapted. And that got me thinking. And I was like, maybe I want to watch all these movies. So I started watching all these movies and shows based on his works. And then I had to stop because I was like, wait a minute, I kind of want to read a bunch of these books now. So I stopped, and I started this like whole separate project. But it's amazing because he does have so many things that have been adapted. So many, even the same title by so many different people. Yeah. It's kind of amazing.
I think things people don't even know, like Stand By Me. I don't think everyone knows that came from a Stephen King story.
The Green Mile.
The Green Mile, yeah.
Green Mile, like he has so many things. But yeah. Lucy, after you watch Dr. Sleep, let me know.
Okay. I will.
Chat. So the last piece I want to mention are huge because it's 6 movies and 2 books, but I'm just going to put in the one clump. J.R.R. Tolkien, you've got Lord of the Rings, and you've got The Hobbit. You've got the book, The Hobbit, and you've got the trilogy for Lord of the Rings. I loved the Lord of the Rings books, and I loved the movies. And again, going with my Coraline years later, I'm like, okay, that's why I was able to enjoy the Lord of the Rings movies as much as the books, even though they changed things and they're different. The way they did it was just, I've seen them so many times. I've only read the books once, but I've seen the movies so many times. And then after the whole drama with waiting years to make The Hobbit into a movie, it came out so many years later, and they didn't just make The Hobbit into a movie. They made it into a trilogy, which they didn't need to. So that made me mad. And I know some people who love Lord of the Rings books and movies who have not seen the Hobbit movies. They refuse to. I watched them. They were not very good. I liked the book, The Hobbit. I did not like the 3 movies, but part of me, even if I'm not going to like it, is I enjoy being in that universe that I love so much. You know, I still got to hang out, you know, with the elves and be in the Shire with these some of the characters that I enjoyed, even if I wasn't into the story or the adaptation. So yeah, but I love the Lord of the Rings movies as much as the books, but The Hobbit, nope.
Yeah, I love the movies too. And I'll never forget, I was in grad school and I got to see a midnight showing of Fellowship, the movie, at the Michigan Theater.
Oh, wow.
So I got out at 2:30 in the morning. It was snowing, and I walked all the way home. And it was just such a great feeling after being a fan of the books for so long and seeing this beautiful movie. And it was nice.
Yeah. And I like it when they have, we know it's going to be a trilogy, and then the following year it's around it was around Christmas time. So for 3 years in a row, you were so excited to go.
Right.
Yeah. But do you guys remember, I forgot about one, the 1970s cartoon of The Hobbit that's so trippy and bizarre?
Yes. Is that Ralph Bakshi?
I don't even know. The library has it on DVD. I watched it again a couple years ago, and I was like, oh yeah, this is insane.
Yeah, it's bleak, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
But I almost like it better than the trilogy. Just because, again, for that weird, it's so bizarre.
Right. That's great. Have you ever...
There you go.
Lucy, have you read those at all?
I have not. I remember my brother being really into them when we were younger, and I saw the first, the Fellowship movies.
Yeah.
And I didn't continue. I don't know why. It just wasn't what?
Don't watch The Hobbit. Don't watch the Hobbit trilogy.
I won't.
Great. Well, I've got a few. There were actually a lot that I'm sure, just like with both of you, that you could have pulled to talk about. But I want to start with Big Little Lies.
Oh, yeah.
So I watched the first season. And again, I just wanted to treat that as one whole story, kind of matching up with the book. And then I just recently started the book and finished it and devoured it. I read it so fast and it was so much fun. I had just never read a book that was just so much fun to just read and get into. And I thought, I loved them both a lot, but I think that the movie added some scenes that made the characters even more interesting. There's a scene in the movie with, I think the actor is Adam Scott, the husband, right?
The dad. Yeah.
Right. And he's accusing his wife of always making him number two, even though they're married, and she's always so fixated on her ex-husband. Do you happen to remember that scene?
Yeah.
And that was not in the book at all. And I thought a scene like that really was great. And there were a few other scenes like that I thought the people putting the show together did a great job with. It was just fun to have both of them. So
yeah, I would agree with that.
Did you guys watch season 2 of the show?
Yeah, I did. Did you?
Yeah, I didn't read the book, but I watched season 1 and season 2. I didn't like season 2 as much as season 1. I don't know why they needed to season 2.
Yeah, season 1 was great. One thing I would say about the show too that I thought enhanced the book was the way they did the music in season 1. How it was all from the youngest daughter's, it was her playlist. Which I have never seen that a character in a story be responsible for the music that you're hearing in the TV show. So I just thought that element of it elevated that show in a way that there's no way you could convey that in a book. So I thought that was a really neat thing that they did with that.
So another one I love the book of was Dune. And I don't know if either of you have read that or seen an adaptation of it. I thought the book was just far and above a lot of sci-fi and fantasy genre. Some of it, of course, is wonderful, but this was the best science fiction book I'd ever read. It was so adult and so deep, and this whole world and economy is created. And, I love David Lynch so much, but the movie just did not do much for me. And I don't have a lot of hope for the new one coming up, but I'd love to be proved wrong. So we'll see.
I didn't read the book, and I only watched the movie because it was David Lynch. I've seen all of his stuff, and I was like, I'm going to watch this. And I probably started it at midnight. I fell asleep. It was when I watched Journey to the Center of the Earth or whatever. I just fell asleep. I tried though, and I like Kyle MacLachlan, but the sci-fi is not my favorite. I'm very, very selective about my sci-fi stuff.
Yeah. So another one on my list is Clockwork Orange. And I like the movie and the book a lot, but I don't know why people constantly repeat this idea. It always appears in lists of movie adaptations that were very faithful to the book. It seems to be something that gets stuck in people's heads, when in fact, the movie totally perverted the message in the book, because the last chapter in the book at least in the original book, shows that the characters have grown up and become really boring adults. And of course, that is not how the movie ends at all. And again, it's fine. You know, there are so many memorable moments from the book and the movie, and they're very different, but I like them both. I don't know if have you read Clockwork Orange?
I haven't read it. I saw the beginning of the movie when I was maybe too young to do so because it terrified me. And so any imagery from it or anything from that point on, it's like, I don't know. Yeah. So I didn't pursue it.
Well,
I was going to say, I read the book when I was in college. I was a lit major, so I had a million classes where I read books and wrote papers, and I read it for that, and I really liked it. I mean, because when I was in college, like I was just sucking down every word, and I really liked the book. It was so bizarre and weird, and like the language, you really started to have to read it in the way their dialogue and the way it was written. And the movie is just like trippy and creepy and like Kubrickian all over the place. So I loved it for that. I loved the weird, and I really enjoyed the movie, even though it was like cringy and terrifying and like,
right.
But I liked it. And I can't speak for the adaptation. I'm sure I saw the movie around the same time, but again, that was so long ago.
Right. Well, and it's got a lot of Russian in it too, which was another
there
draw for me. So
also the music in the movie is amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's funny. That's something that keeps coming up with all of us is when you read a book, you don't get that soundtrack. Yeah. Really. And it really adds so much when you watch a movie.
Yeah. I mean, what was it? Was it Walter Carlos? Or was it Wendy Carlos?
I don't remember if it was Walter or Wendy. Yeah.
But it was amazing. And that was like my introduction to like the Moog synthesizer sound. And I remember like when I would be thrifting, I would look for records or like I had an 8-track. I think that was Wendy Carlos. It was just crazy. It was so like Moog and trippy and bizarre. And it was a perfect match, that sound for the uneasiness that the music was supposed to make you feel.
Right. So last on my list is Cloud Atlas. Mm-hmm. And this is the only Mitchell book that I've read, and I just loved it so much. I loved all the different genres that he packs in there, and this, you know, the continuity that runs through all these stories. And then I immediately saw the movie. Lucy, earlier you were saying that you sometimes want to just sit with a great story before seeing the movie. Well, I did not.
Oh, no. And it sounds where this is going.
Yeah, the book is so beautiful. Mm-hmm. I just don't know how the movie could ever stand up to that. Right. So those are my picks. Well, I want to thank both of you. This was so much fun, and maybe there should be a spin-off. So